The Case of the Two Timelines. Welcome back to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations, and you're listening to another Whodunit Wednesdays, where we step into the world of classic detective fiction. Tonight, we travel back to a time of sharp suits, wisecracks, and dangerous dames, where the neon glow of a late-night diner was the only thing between a gumshoe and trouble. It started with a con, a simple little grift, played by a man who looked like your favorite uncle, but had the morals of a snake oil salesman. Simon Ralston built his life on charm and deception, but when private eyes Johnny Chandler and Vicky Langford caught his scent, his latest scheme started to crumble. Meanwhile, a man lay dead in his fancy Yorkville townhouse, with but a single clue. A business card of one, Simon Ralston. As Mick and Mack, Johnny and Vicky, followed the threads, they'd find themselves caught between past cons and present crimes, between deception and justice, where every clue pointed to something bigger lurking in the shadows. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations, and this is an Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Fictional episode of Whodunit Wednesdays in a Mick and Mack mystery. Go back to the golden era of detective fiction and enjoy stories in the tradition of the greats of writing. From Agatha Christie, Raymond Chandler to John Creasy, these are short stories I hope you enjoy. Time has a funny way of catching up with us, and in the city's underbelly, old secrets never stay buried for long. Join me as we unravel the case of the two timelines, a Mick and Mack mystery, on Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel, Nickel Investigations. This is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects, stories that demand to be heard. Each week, we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mack mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Chapter 1. Simon Ralston was a con artist, but not the usual kind. With a warm smile and twinkling eyes, he had the air of a favorite uncle. The kind of man you'd trust with your last dollar. And plenty of people had. His latest mark was Mrs. Eleanor Hargrave, sweet widow, who'd come to Johnny Chandler's office with a simple request. Retrieve the family heirloom she had foolishly entrusted to Ralston, believing him to be an honest dealer. Johnny and Vicky had tailed Ralston for weeks, watching as he wove his charm through Toronto's antique circles. Tonight, he was making his move at Marconi's Antiques, peddling an ornate pocket watch to an unsuspecting collector. Johnny adjusted the lapels of his suit and nodded to Vicky. It was time to step in. The flickering neon sign outside Marconi's Antiques cast long shadows across a cobblestone alley. Inside, Vicky adjusted the hem of her silk evening gloves, while Johnny examined the watch under the watchful eyes of a wiry shopkeeper. Their cover was simple. A wealthy collector and his discerning wife looking for rare finds. Lovely craftsmanship, Johnny murmured, turning the timepiece in his hands. French. Late 18th century, I'd say. Ralston, standing nearby, beamed. Ah, my dear sir, you have a keen eye. A rare find indeed. One that carries a rich history. Vicky arched a well-manicured eyebrow. Funny. I saw an identical, one-of-a-kind piece in a pawn shop on College Street just last week. Ralston chuckled, his face a picture of wounded innocence. My dear lady, surely you don't think I'd peddle anything less than authentic. I have a reputation to uphold. Johnny smirked. That's exactly what we're here to discuss. You see, Mrs. Eleanor Hargrave says you relieved her of a very similar heirloom. Ralston's smile flickered for a brief moment before he sighed theatrically. Ah, Mrs. Hargrave. A lovely woman, truly. But you must understand, I only broker deals. If she misunderstood the arrangement. Save it, Ralston, Vicky interrupted. The watch. Now. Ralston folded his hands as though weighing his options. Finally, he gave a little nod. Very well. He'd drive a hard bargain. The watch will be returned. But in exchange, I trust you won't involve the authorities. Johnny crossed his arms. Why exactly should we do that? Ralston leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Because I may have some further information that could be of interest. Ever hear of a man named Calloway? Johnny frowned. Can't say that I have. Ralston gave a knowing smile. You will. Chapter 2. Murder in Yorkville. Hours later, Mick and Mack were called to a quiet townhouse in Yorkville. The home was immaculately kept, a testament to its owner's meticulous nature. Heavy velvet curtains framed the parlor windows, shielding the interior from curious passerby. A grand staircase dominated the entryway, its polished mahogany railing gleaming in the dim light. At the foot of the stairs lay Theodore Calloway, crumpled in an unnatural position. Blood had pooled beneath his head, staining the delicate floral pattern of the expensive rug. Mack knelt beside the body, running a hand over his chin as he examined the scene. He didn't just take a tumble, Mack muttered. Somebody helped him along. Mick nodded, sharp eyes scanning the room. And whoever it was wanted to look like an accident. On the desk, a business card from Ralston's shop sat neatly beside an ashtray still warm with smoldering tobacco. Mick picked up the card, turning it over in his fingers. Looks like Mr. Ralston was here recently. Mack moved to the window, peering through the heavy curtains. Hold on, we've got company. He watched as two figures walked toward the townhouse, then hesitated, turning and hurrying away when they spotted the police cars. Something tells me they weren't just taking an evening stroll. Mack turned to Mick. I'm going to follow them, see what they're up to. You keep looking around here. Mick nodded. Try not to get yourself killed, all right? Mack smirked. No promises. Chapter 3. The Tale. Mack kept a steady distance behind the two figures as they wove through the quiet streets of Yorkville. When they finally stopped in front of a small office building, Mack leaned against a lamppost and watched as he stepped inside. The frosted glass on the door read, "Chandler and Langford, private investigators." Mack smirked. Well, this just got interesting. Inside, Johnny tossed his hat onto a chair and stretched. "I don't know about you, but I need a drink." Vicky shook her head. "Before you drown yourself in bourbon, let's talk about that little nugget Ralston dropped. Ever hear of a man named Calloway? You will? Looks like he wasn't lying." Johnny poured himself a drink anyway. No kidding. The guy turns up dead, and now we're neck deep in it. Before Vicky could respond, there was a firm knock on the door. Johnny exchanged a glance with Vicky before opening it. Mack stood there, hands in his pockets, a slow grin on his face. "Couldn't help but overhear some talk of a guy named Calloway. Care to explain what you were seen leaving a dead guy's house?" Johnny sighed, and here I was hoping this was a social call. Chapter 4. Meeting at Ralston's. Mick followed up on the only solid lead they had, the business card from Ralston's shop. He stepped inside only to find Johnny, Vicky, and Mack already there. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Mick remarked. Ralston, looking more agitated than usual, threw up his hands. "If I'd known I was hosting a reunion, I would have baked a cake." Mack smirked. "Might want to hold off on that frosting, Ralston. We've got some questions." Ralston sighed. "Look, I was laundering money for Calloway, but I swear I had nothing to do with his death. If anything, I was looking for a way out." Mick folded his arms. "You had a good reason to want him gone." Ralston scoffed. "Tell me, what time did he die?" Mick checked his notes. Medical examiner puts it between 7:30 and 8 o'clock last night. Ralston grinned. "Then I've got the perfect alibi. At that exact moment, I was admiring a rather exquisite timepiece, with Johnny and Vicky right beside me." Johnny sighed. "I hate to say it, but for once, Ralston's telling the truth. And trust me, I'm as surprised as you are." Chapter 5. Digging into Calloway's life. Mick and Mack searched Calloway's townhouse, poring over every detail. The study was lined with bookshelves, filled with volumes on art and finance. Mick spoke up. If Calloway was laundering money through Ralston, maybe he was skimming a little off the top for himself. Mack, looking through drawers, stood up and shrugged. "I guess he could be. Makes as much sense as I can make out. But that means he must have had a partner. But I can't find anything." The painting above the fireplace caught Mick's eye. The brushwork was meticulous, but what stood out were the initials in the lower corner. S.A. "Could be a Samuel Elkin," Mack murmured. Mick crossed his arms. "Could be. Or could just be some unknown painter. Wait, who's Samuel Elkin?" "An English artist, 1756 to 1815. A leading exponent of the newly developed technique of aquatint," said Mack, admiring the painting. "No, just someone copying his technique. Quite good, though." Mick looked on, stunned. "What? I like art, so sue me," said Mack. "Either way, we're out of leads." Meanwhile, Johnny and Vicky, with Ralston in tow, took a different approach, looking into the people Ralston had conned. As Ralston leaned back in his chair, he sighed dramatically. Of course, this is all under duress, and I shall deny everything if needed. Vicky smirked. That's nice, Ralston. I'll try not to enjoy this too much while we recount the worst of your misdeeds. Ralston grinned. Enjoy? My dear, I am merely performing a public service by recounting these sordid tales. There was a gentleman who thought he was investing in a gold mine. Turns out, just a rather deep hole in his finances. Oh, and let's not forget the widow who wanted a rare gemstone. She got one, just not from this planet. Johnny exhaled. Ralston, were any of these people connected to Calloway? Is that why you mentioned his name? Ralston's expression changed slightly. Now that you mention it, I did see Calloway with a lady I recognized. Sarah Abington. Vicky sat forward. How do you know Sarah Abington? She was one of your marks, wasn't she? Ralston smiled. I like to think of them more as donators. Johnny shook his head. That's one way to put it. Realizing they had something solid, Johnny and Vicky headed to meet Mick and Mack. When they mentioned Sarah Abington's name, Mick's eyes lit up. That name sound familiar to you, Mack? Mack pointed toward the painting. S.A. Initials on the painting in Calloway's house. That can't be a coincidence. Johnny grinned. Looks like we got ourselves a connection. Time to pay Sarah Abington a visit. Chapter 6. A Visit with Sarah Abington. Mick and Mack arrived at Sarah Abington's grand estate, sprawling house lined with high hedges and a wrought iron gate. The butler led them into an elegantly decorated sitting room, where Sarah lounged comfortably in a deep armchair, a glass of sherry in one hand. She looked them over with mild amusement. Detectives. Finally. I was wondering when someone would come calling. Mick and Mack exchanged a glance. Mack spoke first. You don't seem surprised to see us. Sarah smirked. Why would I be? I assume this is about Theodore Calloway. I can assure you, detectives, I have nothing to hide. She set down her glass and leaned forward. I realized something was wrong when I attended a gala last month. Saw a dear friend wearing a bracelet that looked identical to one of mine. Naturally, I asked where she got it, and she told me it was from a fabulous antique shop. She reached into a drawer and produced a business card. Marconi's Antiques. Mick took the card, his jaw tightening. So he went to check it out? Of course, Sarah said. And imagine my surprise when I saw an old acquaintance behind the counter. Mr. Ralston. Although when I knew him, he went by Geoffrey Beecham. Apparently, he swindled so many people he can't even remember them all. Mack raised an eyebrow. So you decided to watch the shop? Naturally, Sarah replied. And just as I suspected, Calloway showed up. It didn't take long to realize what was happening. Calloway was borrowing my jewelry and handing it over to someone else. Someone making near-perfect copies. Mick frowned. So you weren't upset about the skimming? Sarah laughed coldly. Oh, there was no skimming, detectives. No. What infuriated me was the realization that my personal collection was being used to produce cheap counterfeits. A cheap imitation of my taste. That I could not tolerate. She took another sip of sherry, her expression sharp. I saw a way to get two for the price of one. Calloway and Ralston, both in a trap of their own making. And yet, you're here. Which means someone got to Calloway first. Tell me, gentlemen, does that mean Ralston is still breathing? Mack leaned in. You don't seem too broken up about Calloway's murder. Sarah shrugged. He was a liar and a thief. I'd shed more tears over a misplaced brooch. Mick tapped a finger on the business card. So if you had nothing to do with his death, why sit back and watch this unfold? Sarah's lips curled into a smile. Detective, I'm a woman who enjoys a good game. And this one is far from over. Chapter 7. Revealing the Truth. Johnny and Vicky arrived just as Mick and Mack were leaving Sarah's estate. When they compared notes, it became clear. Sarah had both motive and opportunity. Calloway's betrayal pushed her over the edge, and she'd been playing the long game, ensuring both Calloway and Ralston paid the price. But there was one flaw in her plan. She'd been too eager to frame Ralston, leaving just enough breadcrumbs for Mick, Mack, Johnny, and Vicky to follow. When they returned to confront her, she greeted them with the same amused expression, but this time, the cracks in her carefully constructed persona were showing. Detective, she said, swirling her sherry. Back so soon? I suppose you've come to arrest me. Mack smirked. That depends. You want to confess now or make us drag it out? Sarah sighed dramatically. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy, but I must admit, it was fun while it lasted. Mick produced a warrant. Sarah Abington, you're under arrest for the murder of Theodore Calloway. She didn't resist. Instead, she finished her drink, set it down, and stood gracefully. Tell me, detective, do I at least get points for style? Johnny chuckled. Oh, plenty, but style won't help you now. As they led her out, Vicky leaned over to Johnny. You think she planned all this from the start? Johnny smirked. Sarah? I think she's been playing this game longer than any of us realized. But in the end, even the best players slip up. Mack patted Ralston on the shoulder. Looks like you live to grift another day. Ralston grinned. Gentlemen, I considered it a public service. Epilogue. A watchmaker's visit. A dimly lit watch repair shop nestled between a tailor and a tobacconist in a quiet corner of the city. Inside, a man with silver-streaked hair and round spectacles adjusted the gears of an ornate pocket watch with steady hands. The faint tick-tick-tick of timepieces filled the shop like a whisper of secrets. The bell above the door jingled. The man didn't look up as a shadow stretched across his workbench. I hear you've been naughty, a smooth, knowing voice said. The watchmaker smirked without looking up. Old habits, my friend. Old habits. Evelyn Whitmore stepped closer, resting a gloved hand on the counter. That's what worries me. I hope you haven't forgotten the difference between business and betrayal. He finally looked up, a glint of amusement in his eyes. Eve, you wound me. I'm retired. Eve leaned in slightly, her smile unwavering. That's funny, because something tells me you're just getting started. The watchmaker chuckled, winding the pocket watch carefully before snapping it shut. Time will tell. The bell jingled again as Eve walked out into the night. The watchmaker watched her go before turning back to his work, a quiet smile still playing on his lips. The end, for now.